Hello there, and welcome to PM Express. Well, it was announced when absolutely no one was expecting it. But the sad reality is, no matter how uncomfortable it makes you feel, as a consumer out there, you would have to cough up more money to pay for water and electricity. Well, that's because the Public Utilities and Regulatory Commission, PURC, earlier today released a new tariff adjustment at a time when Ghanaians are having a hard time dealing with the already escalating rate of inflation. Well, the situation is even worse for the business community, which is arguably receiving the biggest shock owing to Ghana's economic meltdown. And guess what? The depreciating Ghana cedi. Well, so tonight on PM Express, stay with us as we put all of the figures together and dissect the very factors accounting for the latest surge in tariffs. So let's get to it, shall we? And break down the figures for you. So we know that the demands were coming through from the utility companies, largely the Electricity Company of Ghana and then the Ghana Water Company. But the demand they were making and proposition they made to the PURC was for a significant 334% increment in terms of our tariffs. And that's for water alone. But in terms of electricity, the Electricity Company of Ghana was making a case for a 148% increment in terms of the tariff adjustments. But guess what? This is the reality today after the announcement. We're getting a clear picture of what all of these utility companies got in exchange for the proposition they made to the PURC. It appears that what's received in the end is 6.45%, a paltry figure, just for the demand of 334%, which the Ghana Water Company was making. And you can tell that clear difference from what it is that the water company was asking for to keep up with this operation and what it is receiving at the end of the day after the announcement by the PURC. But the situation is not even different for electricity. Guess what? 148%. That's what the Electricity Company of Ghana was looking out for. Eventually, that's not what was agreed. They are receiving at the end just a difference of about 18.34% in terms of what they are asking for. So what are the actuals? The actuals are right here, the agreed tariffs. And this is where it is. For water, you now have to be paying 21.55 in terms of the increment. And for those of you who are wondering what will happen to electricity, this is what will happen, 22.15%. That's where we are today, and that's the announcement we're receiving from the PURC. But let's get to it in terms of the implications for you as a consumer. We start off with a focus on water. Water is life, isn't it? But look at it. If you are a residential consumer, which means that you're dealing within the 5 cubic meter range, what you'd have to do and take note of is that if you're paying 22.45, which was the previous rate, there'll be an increment of that 21% change in terms of the value, which will now result in a new tariff of 27.29 for you as a consumer. And this is in Ghana cedi terms. But beyond that as well, you know that for water, there are various categories that we have. So for those of you who are going beyond the average 5 cubic meters in terms of the residential and going to the range of 10 cubic meters, what would happen is that there will be a slight change in the ultimate figure. So if you're having to pay for the 62 Ghana cedis, which you used to pay, and until the new announcement is coming through, there will be some variation. So now there'll be a significant shoot up from the 62 cedis, and it's taking you to the very end where you would now be paying 75.39 pesos. You may want to ignore that. So let's place it somewhere around 75 Ghana cedis. But there is also an implication for you if you're a commercial owner, because obviously for commercial reasons, if you're using water, the PURC says it's putting some relief in there for you. You don't have a significant change in terms of the figures, but still there's a likely implication for you. So let's get to it, shall we? For those of you who are non-residential users dealing with about 10 cubic meters of water, your previous rate was ranging somewhere around 98.30 Ghana cedis. Now you'd have to pay 119.49. That's where it's moving to. But beyond this as well, if your volumes get to open a bit more, open to, say, the commercial rate of 10 cubic meters, then you'd move from 129 Ghana cedis, which is the current rate. Obviously, there'll be some addition of close to 20 more Ghana cedis on it, and so you'd be arriving somewhere around 157.69 Ghana cedis. So that's the story for water. But guess what? There's also the aspect and the argument about electricity. So let's get to it then. For electricity, there are categories of consumers. We know that there is a lifeline consumer, which basically cares for persons who are not in the average consumption rate. So for those in the lifeline, they're deemed as the poorest of the poor, or whichever category in which you want to put them. Their consumption is not as much, so there's a leeway for them. And the indication we're getting now is that for the lifeline consumers, if you're within that range of 30 kilowatts per hour, what you would be paying would just be a difference of some 2.7 Ghana cedis, because it's moving from 12 Ghana cedis to 14.7 Ghana cedis. That's what you're paying. So 14 cedis, 70 pesos thereabout. That's the figure you're going to be dealing with. And then for those of you who are dealing in the range of the non-residentials, it's moving somewhere from 108. If you're dealing in the range of 120 kilowatts per hour, it's taking you right up by some 10 Ghana cedis margin to 112.97. So that's 112 Ghana cedis, 97 pesos or so. That's the range where you'd have to be looking out for. But we need to point out tonight that for those of you who are in the lifeline category, you need to pay attention to your consumption. Because if you used to consume the 50 kilowatts per hour, that used to be the lifeline range before. But now it's been revised by the PURC, which clearly indicates that where we are today has been revised from the 0 to 50 to 0 to 30 kilowatts per hour. So a lot more people would have to be paying more for electricity. But what are some of the reasons accounting for where we are today? Because the proposition from all of the utility companies and the stakeholders, as PURC is pointing out to, obviously mentioned some key factors accounting for where we are today. And top for the reasons given by the Ghana Water Company, obviously they're talking about the high cost of treatment of water, turbidity levels very high, and they are also pointing to some operational situations that will warrant an obvious increment in the rate. But for electricity, they're talking about, guess what? The exchange rate. And we do know what's happening to the Ghana cedis. In fact, we'll get to the figures for you shortly. You look at the increasing prices of fuel. You know the story already, because obviously you're commuting to and fro, so you know what the situation is out there. Then they're talking about the Ghana cedi, and then the increase in demand for electricity. Electricity has expanded to some 90% in terms of access. That's what we're dealing with. And these are some of the factors accounting for that. But yes, we're talking about inflation. It's a big factor where Ghanaians obviously are paying much more for the prices of goods and services on the market. But the story is telling in terms of the stark difference where we were last year and where we are now. So take a look at it. A year ago, 9%, that was the inflation rate, single digit. We shot up by June 2022 to a whopping 29.80%. That's where we shot up to by middle of this year. The story is not the same, because just weeks ago, the Ghana Statistical Service pointed out to us clearly that there was a difference in terms of the increment, some 3.31 percentage points of an upward adjustment to the inflation figures as well. So it shot up right from June to July to 31.70%. So you can see that we've moved by some 20% more percentage points in terms of the difference and the rate of escalating prices right from a year ago to the story where we are now as of July 2022. The cedi was, just look at it. 6 a year ago, now it's at 9.1. So if you have just $1, what used to give you 6 Ghana cedis is now giving you close to 9, or some will argue, let's make it 10 Ghana cedis, but let's not exaggerate. But here's the difference. It was not as bad as much a month ago, somewhere in June, July, when, of course, we're dealing with a rate of 7.43. That was marginal, but in terms of the change, it's changed significantly, and we've moved all the way to 9.1. So that's where the story is, and obviously there's a need for us to unpack all of this and see the way forward as to what the implications will be for you as a consumer. So let me tell you about my guest tonight. Dr. Kofi Obute is the Director of Research and Corporate Affairs, PURC. Denzel Kwesi Humphrey is a member of the Ghana Hotels Association. Charles Ni Ayuku is the External Communications Manager of ECG. Obviously, we'll be getting into the matters and their argument as to whether or not our lights will still be on. John Foster Ejaho is Principal Statistician for the Ghana Statistical Service. Stay with us. We unpack all of this after this. And you're welcome back to PM Express. Well, tonight we're simply looking at the utility tariffs and accounting for the increase in the figures. Let me bring in Dr. Kofi Obute, Director of Research and Corporate Affairs at PURC. So, Doc, we've heard of the announcement, but as to the factors, we've broken all of that down. What is accounting for a revision of the proposition that you received from ECG and the Ghana Water Company Limited? In fact, there are other utility companies, but I just want us to focus on these two organizations. Dr. Obute, you'd have to unmute for us so we can get the point you're making.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for the opportunity.
Right.
And the first thing I want to note is the fact that you said electricity prices had gone up by 22%. In the slide you showed at first, I don't know if I saw it very well. You said 22%. It's actually 27.15%. And the reasoning for the tariffs is actually the fact that the proposals that were made by ECG was to the tune of 148%, and that for Ghana Water was 300% from 7.2 cedis per cubic meter to 28.2 cedis per cubic meter. Now, the Commission took into consideration the fact that the OPEX, which is the operational expenses, granted all the operational expenses to the utilities so that they will not say they don't have money to run the day-to-day activities. So fuel and lubricants, salaries, all those ones were given for free. Were given to them fully as to how they give it, they proposed in the tariff. It was given to them. Now, the CAPEX, there are three parts of the CAPEX. There's a capital expenditure. The first part is to do with the government grants that has been given to the utilities. That's grants we took out of the tariff. We didn't add grants to it. Then came in the government funding. They said they have government on-lend loans. Now the on-lend loans, government said it doesn't expect them to pay back the on-lend loans. So we took that one out as well. Then also the shareholder is government. Government is 100% shareholding of the companies. And government said the dividend that you pay to me, keep the dividend as well. So that portion as well, we did not pass through the tariff. The tariff itself, we said, was going to be from 2022 to 2027, a 5-year tariff. Then we cap it at 2025. That makes it 3 years. So the last 2 years, 2026 and 2027 as well, we had to share it off. That means that the investment for those 2 years as well was not captured in the tariff that we considered. So all in all, we considered all of that together with the macroeconomic indicators, as well as the concerns of the consumers as we went around the entire country. And this is the tariff that the Commission came up with.
And in fact, in the press release, we're getting a clear indication that the last time you actually embarked on this exercise was in 2018, right? What's accounting for the delayed adjustment?
Well, we have a major tariff, and then we have a minor tariff as well. Minor tariffs are the ones which we consider as a quarterly adjustment, which we do on a quarterly basis. The major one was done in 2018. Then we did one in 2019 as well. July 1, 2019, it kicked in. Then thereafter, we did what we call the quarterly adjustments. Previously, we call it the automatic adjustment, but now we tend to call it the quarterly adjustment. Then we did that. Then up until 2020, October 2020 thereabout, we did the quarterly adjustment for the last part of 2020. Now, don't forget that as of 2021, we had a new government in place and we needed a board. The previous board was dissolved, so we didn't have a board and we couldn't do anything without the board. So we had to wait until November when we had a board in place. Then we kickstart the new process again. So this process should have been done in 2021, but because we did not have a board, we had to wait until we had a board before we start the process once more. So that's how come we are now doing it in 2022.
Yeah, but unfortunately, and I'm sure that you've heard that criticism, it's coming at a time when Ghanaians are grappling with the inflation figures. It's surging, it's on the rise. Were you mindful of that factor when you were putting out the figures?
Yes, we were. We took all of those things into consideration. So we know inflation is on the ascendancy, exchange rate is depreciating. It's affecting the utilities as well as affecting consumers as well. So we took all those factors into consideration before we came up with this tariff.
But then if that would mean that a lot more people would be moved into the zone of discomfort. I'm saying that particularly because paying attention to, for instance, the ECG figures, it appears that you're shifting a lot more people out of, for instance, the lifeline zone. Now you're shifting the threshold to some 30 kilowatts, I should say, per hour. That was different from what used to be when you were dealing with the 50 kilowatts per hour as your threshold. What also accounted for that change or revision of the figures?
Okay, when we had a 0 to 50 kilowatt hours, we were using then the incandescent bulbs, the onion type of bulbs, those round bulbs. And we needed that one. Those ones were very not energy efficient. So if somebody has one of that and is using, let's say, a small radio and a small black and white TV, we considered that it would have come in the range of 0 to 50 kilowatt hours. That's a poor. And it was based on a study that the Energy Commission did. So we picked that from the Energy Commission. We work in tandem with the Energy Commission. Now we have energy saving bulbs, energy saving equipment. So we don't need that huge 0 to 50 tariff band again to be able to operate. So the poorest of the poor can make do with 0 to 50 to 30 kilowatt hours. And that accounts for the reduction in the tariff band from 0 to 50 down to 0 to 30. That's what accounted for it.
But overall, the posture you're adopting, and correct me if I'm wrong, is that you're discomforting consumers and giving some relief to businesses. You say you're doing that because you want to preserve jobs and also sustain industry. I guess you're mindful of the economic challenges confronting us. But the fear is that you may push a lot of Ghanaians into that space where they don't want to be, coughing up more money just to pay for such critical facilities such as water, its services, and then that of electricity.
Well, the world over, what happens is that industries actually pay less compared to residential customers. Why that? Because the cost of serving industry is cheaper than the cost of serving residential customers. You need to put a lot more transformers in place before you get to the residential customers. The industrial customers can really pick the voltages at very high levels, which the residential customers cannot pick. So what happened in the past was that industrial customers were always cross-subsidizing the residential customers. What we are trying to do is to realign the tariff in such a way that we'll get people to use the electricity for productive use and not just for social activities. So we try to encourage production, trying to encourage employment, for which reason we try to lower the tariffs for industrial class.
Yeah, but what's your ultimate aim? What's your ultimate aim as the PRC? Are you in there for businesses or for the average consumer?
We are in there for everybody. We are in there for all the customers. We are in there for the utilities. We are more like a referee on the field of play. We have to speak for the utilities, and we have to also look at the consumer. Because if you don't keep the utilities in business, the utilities will fold up, and that will even bring more hardship to the citizenry. So whilst we are crying for the consumers, we also have to look at the utilities as well. So we are in there for everybody.
Well, Doc, stay with me because, in fact, there's a lot of reaction greeting your announcement. Let's start off with your very good friends at the ECG. They have some concerns. Charles, let's hear from you. 148%, you're not getting anywhere close to that figure. How does it make you feel as the Electricity Company of Ghana? Kindly unmute for us so we can get the points you're making. Hello, Charles. Yeah, yes, Charles, I was just asking about the variation in the figures. Charles, we're unable to hear you. Kindly unmute so we can get the point you're making. It appears that Charles is having some challenges connecting with us and sharing their perspective. Let's try one more and see if one more time and see if Charles is there. Charles, yes, let's try and see. Charles, so yes, I was just asking about the variation in the figures.
Hello?
Yes, Charles.
Hello, please, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you, Charles.
Hello, please, can you hear me?
Okay, we'll try and work with Charles. But Denzel, I mean, for the business community, this is some sort of a relief to you, isn't it? Because clearly, if you take a look at it, the PRC says, we're in very tough times. Let's preserve jobs until you're not having to pay as much as the average consumer out there. Good deal?
Yeah, good deal. Bless, thank you, and good evening to all your viewers. There's a problem, you know, consumers already paying exorbitant rates for electricity charges already. So, I mean, if you look at our economy now, how our CD performing against other international currency, it's not a good sign. So it's putting a lot of pressure on consumers and also, of course, business people. You can tell a lot of businesses are folding up, you know. So it's quite a tough time for all of us, you know. And then I wish government can do something about it.
What was your expectation at the time the announcements were being made? And would you say that at least your PRC is meeting you halfway?
Well, the PRC are doing their best, but I think that, you know, when it comes to the negotiation table, they can do better. I mean, if you look at the rates from where they are and what we are paying now, it's a bit on the high side. So we don't want to rule it out because at the end of the day, if we're not paying the right tariff, then of course electricity cannot be provided to us. So we need to meet halfway and find a better solution to this problem.
And in fact, the bigger fear out there is that you are businesses, you have a private motive, you want to make profit. So in the end, we may be at the receiving end. So what you do is simply to pass on the cost to the consumer. And that's going to compound the problem because already we're paying more than you're having to pay now. And then when we use your services,
exactly,
we'll
exactly, because yes, for instance, I'm in a hospitality business, and if you look at my operations from last year now, electricity can obviously pass all of that on to your customers because at the end of the day, then nobody shows up at your hotel, and it's quite difficult. So we have to make way for the rates that we are taking as of 2 years ago, because you can't just say, okay, so electricity tariffs have gone up, my room rates will have to go down automatically. It's a bit of a problem for us, you know. So it's making life very, very difficult to tell you the truth.
Yeah, but what's setting is that prices of your members of the association, in terms of the various hotels that we have across the country, may have to, add on, increase the prices. That's what we should expect, right?
Exactly. And I think that's one of the problems that I've also noticed over the period of time is that, these regulatories will have to be more efficient so that all the waste in the pipelines will be taken care of. Because at the end of the day, it's not just about taking tariffs. Sometimes you pay for a service and you don't even get what you pay for in the first place. Like, for instance, my hotel, I pay for water, and sometimes if I don't fall on my borehole, I don't even get water. But at the end of the month, they show up with some exorbitant tariffs, and you are compelled to pay. So I think that we also have to look at the wastage and the forms and the approach to how they take tariffs and the services that they provide to we customers, because sometimes it's quite frustrating,
In fact, we'll be talking about the outlook shortly, at least trying to find out more from the Ghana Statistical Service in terms of what the projections are and what we should be expecting. Let me try one more time and see if Charles is back on with us. Charles, I was just asking you about the 148% position you were putting out there to PRC. You're nowhere close to that figure. So are we guaranteed that the lights will be on?
Hello, good evening. And please, can you hear me?
Loud and clear, Charles.
Thank you very much. Yes, so we requested for 148%, but we got the 27.15%, which of course is way below our proposed tariff. But we have accepted it and would continue to provide the quality, reliable, and safe service to our customers. I know your next question will be how we can manage these. Of course, we will still hold some consultations with our stakeholders, including PRC, and share with our stakeholders the numbers. I mean, in terms of how would be having challenges with the kind of percentage that you've been given by the PRC. But in the meantime, we would look at our priority areas and then see how best we can adjust. But we can assure our customers that we will not compromise on our service quality.
Yeah, but if you look at the conditions you were giving, you talked about some operational difficulties that may arise out of any variation in the 148 you were asking. And if it's about your operations, then definitely it's got to do with the lights. So you're being diplomatic in telling us, well, we'll keep it, we'll try our best. But if it doesn't come on, you don't blame the ECG.
No, I'm not being diplomatic. I'm just let you know the reality. I mean, as I indicated, we would keep having conversations with our stakeholders, our donors, and all to come to our aid when it comes to some of our challenges. But as a company, we have our priority areas. I mean, in terms of what we submitted to PRC, as you indicated, our challenges that would affect us severely, but would prioritize these areas and would speak to PRC and other stakeholders to come to our aid. And we've also put in place some measures even before the announcement. And I'm sure you're aware of the visibility exercise that we've undertaken to increase our revenue and reduce our losses. And so far, it's going well. Yes, so we are working on all other areas to make sure that we don't disappoint our customers.
Indeed, I was just about talking about that point, the issue about power loss and wastage within the system. What practical measures are there that you can point out to say, well, this is what we've done and it's telling on the figures. We're improving and we're raking in more revenue. Do you have the figures to put out there and to tell us you're improving on the revenue aspect?
Well, I wouldn't want to give out any specific figures now because we are still on the ground, but I can clearly tell that just after the moratorium, we've visited the premises of our customers, we've audited some meters, we are still doing that across all operational areas. And of course, we've come to the realization that there are a lot of bypass of meters and all of these things that our customers are doing. So we have been able to arrest, we've arraigned some before the court, that's the Special Utilities Court, and we are still in the process of getting others who have, we've arranged for them to, who have been surcharged and they've agreed to pay. So these are some of the things we are doing, and we are still on the ground and making sure that we get all these corporates.
Okay, then. We've heard from ECG, we've heard from some hoteliers who are giving us a sense of what to expect in the coming days. But in terms of the outlook, because we pointed out to you the factors accounting for this, part of them has got to do with inflation, and the Ghana Statistical Service just released the latest figures. But what's the projection going forward? Let me bring in John Foster. John, from your desk right now, I'm sure that you're still monitoring the figures, so you're able to tell us what the outlook may be in the coming days. Should we expect the worst?
Good evening, and good evening to your cherished viewers. Certainly, I would say this is not good news. I mean, considering the fact that electricity, water, gas, and other fuels constitute the second largest weight in the CPI basket. And therefore, we at Statistical Service, we always keep our eyes on the three top major elements in the basket. These are food and non-alcoholic beverages, electricity, water, gas, and other fuel, and then transport. And interestingly, today we are aware of the rates that have been given. And if all the other variables in the basket even remain constant, we will certainly see some appreciable increases in inflation. Simply because when you do the year-on-year, last year, same period, we did not record increases in these utility tariffs. But another thing that we need to focus our mind on, and as we heard from our colleague from the business sector, is the fact that a lot of industries and service providers depend on water and electricity as their input to provide their service.
Yes.
And so once they have gone up, these people will also invariably try to pass on the cost. So we're going to have a pass-through effect of the announced rate today. So it's going to be like a double barrel effect on the inflation basket, one on its own as a variable in the basket, and also as a pass-through effect affecting other things like hoteliers, like probably sachet water, like those in the repair industries and all those things. So those are the things that if we are not too careful, if we don't get the bumper harvest that we're expecting from the food sector, then I'm afraid we may not be laughing as we were all
Foster, let's draw on this point a bit more, because the PRC is explaining to us in terms of the reasons accounting for the variation in the figures, that they're seeking to cushion the business community simply because we want to preserve industry and prevent job losses. But in the end, what you are arguing is that they may be compounding the situation. Is that your argument?
Obviously. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I was just asking if that's your argument.
Yes, you see, we may put in the mitigating factors, that's fine. And as we keep announcing these days, there are two sides to the coin. Apart from the real factors that are affecting inflation, there's the behavioral effect of the Ghanaian market women and market men. So yes, POIC may put in measures to try to cushion workers so they don't go out of business. But the seamstress, the tailor, the shoe repairer, the TV repairer on the street, once they've heard about increment in utility tariffs, they also take advantage of the situation. And even if they are not adversely affected, they go ahead to increase prices. That's aside even the actual pass-through effect that we are envisaging. So yes, they may put in the policy and make sure people don't go out of business, but certainly prices of goods will go up. That is something that we cannot run away from.
We've had a narrative on countless occasions that no matter what we do, prices will keep soaring. Is that far-fetched?
Not really, no. If I limit the discussion to inflation, the item we have in the basket, we are in the period where we are all expecting to enjoy the bumper harvest. We are in the harvest season. And so if our farming sector is doing so well, if the Greek sector is doing so well, and we begin to see a lot of food on the market, then we are likely to see a kind of reduction in the food sector. And the good news is that our food and non-alcoholic beverages constitute about 43.7% of the total weight of the basket. And so they say, even if there's a marginal decrease in that sector, we will enjoy some appreciable decrease in inflation. But if we don't realize that big harvest that we're expecting from that big sector, then I'm afraid these increases in utility tariffs and any other thing that may come up could continue the price soaring that we are seeing.
Okay, so if there's any factor that the PRC has to take a look at, perhaps review within this, after the 3-year window, what would that have to be? What does the PRC need to focus on in terms of review?
Well, that's a tough one, but because I appreciate, the standard, where they are, because they also have to make sure the providers also stay in business. And so, for me, I would have accepted this wholeheartedly if it had come at any other ordinary times when we're not finding ourselves in this difficult situation. But going forward, of course, I will plead, as a normal Ghanaian citizen, that even when we want to grant this increase, we should consider the time. Certainly not at this time that we are recording higher price increases, higher inflation, and we bring this on board, we definitely know that we're going to contribute to the upward trend of inflation. So probably going forward, I will plead that when there's a need to do it, they should also look at the tempo of the country, the period. The time is very important. I don't think this timing, for me, is.
Well, Dr. Obuche, your timing is being called into question now, and beyond that as well, we're having to deal with the pass-on effects, which the Ghana Statistical Service is raising some concerns about. Were you mindful of all of this at the time you were putting together the figure? Because for the commercial entities, these are profit-making bodies. So obviously, they'll pass on the effect to the average consumer out there. You've not solved our problems, have you?
Well, earlier on, I told you that PURC actually sits in as a referee. The more we delay this, the bigger the problem gets. Because just as we said, everybody is suffering. The companies are also suffering. The steel companies are suffering. Everybody else is suffering in the economy. The same way the utilities are also suffering, because they also need to import crude oil. They need to buy chemicals. They need to pay their staff. They need to do maintenance, operational. How do they get the money to do all of that? So as long as we delay the tariff, the problem gets bigger and bigger. Would we as Ghanaians prefer that maybe we delay the process and then we get, let's say, a 90% tariff adjustment, or we bite the bullet now and do a gradual adjustment to catch up?
No, but the point is, what we're dealing now with is for a 3-year period. Within this window, do you still have another opportunity to either review the figures downward or upward as you have done?
It will be corrected as we move along. I spoke earlier on about the quarterly adjustment.
Right.
So on a quarterly basis, we would adjust the tariffs, taking into consideration the exogenous variables, for instance, the exchange rate, the inflation, the fuel cost, the generation mix between hydro and thermal. As we speak, thermal component is about 65%, and the hydro is just about 34-35%. Solar is just something very marginal. So we are dealing more on thermal compared to what we get from hydro. So point is, do we wait a little bit longer and get a bigger problem on our hands, or we try to solve the problem now and correct it gradually through the quarterly adjustment?
Yeah, but whichever way you look at it, but
the
whichever way you look at it,
it was wise to tackle it now.
Whichever way you look at it, the argument is looking at the pressure that you received from the utility companies and the rate at which they were demanding some drastic upward review of the figures. There's no way you would make use of the quarterly reviews to, slash the figures or vary them to the advantage of the average consumer? We're ever increasingly going to be paying more, right?
Well, as I said, the quarterly adjustment takes care of the exogenous variables. That's beyond the control of the utilities. They don't have control over the exchange rate. They don't have control over the inflation. They don't have control over crude oil prices. So as and how we get these figures, we will adjust the tariff accordingly to suit that particular occasion. Exchange rate now, it's in the region of 9 cedis to the dollar, but we didn't use 9 cedis at the commission for the tariff adjustments. You get me? So we try, because if we try to push through the 9 cedis, the tariff will go through the roof. So we try to correct it gradually using the quarterly adjustment instead of just giving it a big bang and push everything at a go. That would be suicidal.
Yeah, precisely why I'm saying that statistically speaking, the figures may never come down because you're not even dealing with the 9.1 that were pointed out as part of the factors accounting for the latest adjustment that you're announcing to us.
Well, as I said, the government can decide to cushion. If the government decides to cushion, the tariffs obviously will go down. If the government decides to take portions of the cost of the utilities, the tariff will go down. So there are various ways by which this can be handled. It's not, you cannot take everything through the tariff. All their investments cannot be recouped through the tariff. That's why I said even the on-lend loans, government has absorbed those portions. The return on equity, government says, don't pay me any return on my equity. I will absorb that as well. That has considerably brought the tariff down. Had it not been for that, the tariff would have been higher than this. So government has a way of coming in to absorb costs.
So how much more cushion do we need, for instance, from government if we want to see a slash in the figures in the next window?
Well, that will have to be done by, it will have to have a meeting with the utilities, the government, and the commission. At this point in time, we've not taken care of that yet.
Yeah, but you were looking at the variables, and that's why I'm asking about the variables, looking at the variables that you have before you. What is that component, key component, which if government, we have government coming through to say, well, our cushion consumers on that part, then we're dealing with a significant portion of the challenge confronting you.
Exchange rate is a main component. So if maybe the exchange rate can be ring-fenced for the utilities, that to be discussed at the government level. If the exchange rate is ring-fenced, that this particular exchange rate should be used for the utilities, then and government will absorb the rest. That can be done. And that will cushion the tariffs.
Okay, then. There's also the issue about the pass-on effect. I'm sure that that's not within your remit. So let's bring in Denzel and find out what the, for instance, the private community, the Ghana Hotels Association intends to do about this. Denzel, you obviously know the times in which we find ourselves. I'm just wondering if you'd be philanthropic in nature by saying, well, we can feel the pain, we're in this together, we'll cushion you a little bit in terms of the consumers.
Well, it's still difficult times, because, businesses are suffering, business people are not making ends meet. It's quite difficult for us at the moment. I think the tariffs will have to be reviewed any while. And the earlier we do that, the better for Ghana. Because at the end of the day, if businesses are not operating, how then do we pay people who are working for us and be profitable so that we can also take good care of them? It's quite difficult, And if you look at how the dollar is galloping, there are no signs that it's going to be stable. So it means that this problem is going to be around for some few months to come. So we have to do something about it because it's not just about paying tariff, but things are collapsing because they simply cannot make ends meet. And it's difficult. If you look around, and lots of businesses are folded up. Because if you buy something today, you turn around, next day, then the dollar say, hey, look at me. It's difficult.
So, for instance, if you have policy measures coming through, will that reverse your decision to just pass on the cost to the average consumer? Denzel?
To the consumer. Yes, at the moment, yes, we have to, because yes, but that's the side part of the story, because it means that every time your dollar goes up, then the consumer is always suffering, and that's the problem, So I think that this tariff, personally, I think that we need to review it. We don't want the regulatories to go through difficult times also providing services to us. And we also don't want to always go back to our customers to say, oh, because we are paying so much in electric, we're taking so much from you. It just doesn't order well for business, because at the end of the day, whatever comes your way, then you pass it on to your customer. And it's difficult. It's difficult. They have to look at it and do something for us business people, because it's not easy for us.
In the end, you are also being criticized as being part of the problem. The reason why we're seeing the skyrocketing depreciation, if we should call it that way, because as the Ghana Hotels Association, majority of your ownership is abroad, and all of these people fly capital back. So you're in the end compounding our situation, you agree?
No, that's not entirely true. That's not entirely true. I mean, we're in business, and you always have to find a way to always stay in business. I don't think that you want to run a business and every other day your prices are going up. It's not comfortable for any businessman.
Yeah, but you're flying the capital away.
There are people
that's
who
the criticism,
need your services. So if they go and then the next day they come, things are going up. It's a bit difficult. The situation on the ground now is that we need to do something about inflation, first of all, because from what doctor is saying, if whatever figures that they are working with now centers around the 9% or the dollar, the CD against the dollar, which is 9 CD plus. So what if next week it goes to 12 CD? It means that then every day I have to go back to my customer to say, oh, you come to visit me this week, next week you come, I'm taking you a different rate.
Right.
And it's difficult,
Denzel,
so I'm saying that let's look at a way
but you're not
where
dealing,
we can...
Denzel, can you hear me? You're not dealing with the issue and the criticisms leveled against you as hotel owners, the issue about capital flight. In fact, some of your members, the members of your group, are charging in dollars. That's even against the BOG rules, but yes, many of your members are flouting that directive. So you are part of the problem as to why we're having the CD not performing well.
Not at all. It's not entirely the situation. It's not entirely the situation. Some hotels do charge in dollars. Yes, of course, everything is pegged against the dollar. So if you have a hotel and you have international people who are coming, depending on what services you're providing for them and what service and what standards that you're looking at, you want to also be out there to meet national standard. So you can't just say, okay, I have to pay this rate. So obviously there's some elements of dollar pegging in there, but that is not entirely the situation. You know what I'm saying? There are people who show up in some hotels. That's how bad the big business is. And for instance, a room that probably could cost you for $100, you want to give it out for $50, because at the end of the day, you have bills to take care of. You get what I'm saying? So these are some of the things we go through as hoteliers, so it's not entirely the situation. Yes, some hotels charge in dollars because they have to match up to an international standard. So if the dollar, or if the CD is not matching up to the dollar, obviously you also need to match up your services to an international level. So definitely there has to be some dollar factor coming in, but it's not all the time the situation, not at all.
Okay then, let me hear from Charles at this point. because Charles, there's another window for you to make another case to perhaps PRC to reconsider the applications you're making. You're asking for 148%. Are you hopeful that, that some more considerations will be done in the next window?
Hello.
Yes, I was just asking
Please,
about the
can you
next.
hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Please, the question again.
I was asking about the next window. The PRC says, well, there'll be another window. Are you still going to make that demand for the 148? At least you don't have anything close to that now.
Well, your line is breaking, but if you can hear me, I indicated earlier that we would still engage with the PRC, and that we are still going to pursue that. So if there's any opportunity for us to go back to PRC to have any conversation on the tariff, we would go back and have that conversation.
Okay, then. And for you, Foster, what should Ghanaians be on the lookout for? Briefly.
Right. For me, I want to say that, well, the rates have come. We want the lights on. We want water. Certainly, they will affect the prices. But there's still hope. I mean, if we are able to have our harvest, as we keep saying, then certainly it may be able to, if like, normalize the increase in these announced rates. But of course, we want to play to businesses also too. As the PRC and then the utilities have shown, they demanded over 100%. They accepted something far low. But I don't think they should also, I mean, as service providers, hotels and industries, go ahead and pass all the increases through. I mean, we can contain some.
We'll wait and see what then happens in the coming days. But I'm grateful to you, gentlemen, for joining us on PM Express. I am Blessed Sogah. For more news, log on to myjoyonline.com. And of course, we'll see you same time tomorrow.